Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. This recording of the reading of Vanity Fair was produced in 1989 by Phoenix Recordings, which holds the copyright thereto. Neither this recording nor any part thereof may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authority from Phoenix Recordings. This edition is distributed exclusively by Books on Tape Incorporated. Before the Curtain. As the manager of the performance sits before the curtain on the boards and looks into the fair, a feeling of profound melancholy comes over him in his survey of the bustling place. There is a great quantity of eating and drinking, making love and jilting, laughing and the contrary, smoking, cheating, fighting, dancing and fiddling. There are bullies pushing about, bucks ogling the women, knaves picking pockets, policemen on the lookout, quacks, other quacks, plague take them, bawling in front of their booths, and yokels looking up at the tinselled dancers and poor old rouged tumblers, while the light-fingered folk are operating upon their pockets behind. Yes, this is Vanity Fair. Not a moral place, certainly, nor a merry one, though very noisy. Look at the faces of the actors and buffoons when they come off from their business, and Tom Fool washing the paint off his cheeks before he sits down to dinner with his wife and the little jack-puddings behind the canvas. The curtain will be up presently, and he'll be turning over head and heels and crying, "How are you?" A man with a reflective turn of mind, walking through an exhibition of this sort, will not be oppressed, I take it, by his own or other people's hilarity. An episode of humour or kindness touches and amuses him here and there. A pretty child looking at a gingerbread stall, a pretty girl blushing whilst her lover talks to her and chooses her faring, poor Tom Fool yonder behind the waggon mumbling his bone with the honest family which lives by his tumbling. But the general impression is one more melancholy than mirthful. When you come home, you sit down to a sober, contemplative, not uncharitable frame of mind, and apply yourself to your books or your business. I have no other moral tale than this to tag to the present story of Vanity Fair. Some people consider fairs immoral altogether, and eschew such, with their servants and families. Very likely they are right. But persons who think otherwise, and are of a lazy or a benevolent or a sarcastic mood, may perhaps like to step in for half an hour and look at the performances. There are scenes of all sorts, some dreadful combats, some grand and lofty horse-riding, some scenes of high life, and some of very middling indeed. Some love-making for the sentimental, and some light comic business, the whole accompanied by appropriate scenery and brilliantly illuminated with the author's own candles. What more has the manager of the performance to say? To acknowledge the kindness with which it has been received in all the principal towns of England through which the show has passed, and where it has been most favourably noticed by the respected conductors of the public press and by the nobility and gentry. He is proud to think that his puppets have given satisfaction to the very best company in this empire. The famous little Becky puppet has been pronounced to be uncommonly flexible in the joints and lively on the wire. The Amelia doll, though it has had a smaller circle of admirers, has yet been carved and dressed with the greatest care by the artist. The Dobbin figure, though apparently clumsy, yet dances in a very amusing and natural manner. The little boy's dance has been liked by some, and, pleased to remark, the richly dressed figure of the wicked nobleman, on which no expense has been spared, and which old Nick will fetch away at the end of this singular performance. And with this, and a profound bow to his patrons, the manager retires, and the curtain rises. London, June 28, 1848. Chapter 1. Chiswick Mall. While the present century was in its teens, and on one sunshiny morning in June, they drove up to the great iron gate of Miss Pinkerton's Academy for Young Ladies on Chiswick Mall, a large family coach with 2 fat horses in blazing harness, driven by a fat coachman in a 3-cornered hat and wig, at the rate of 4 miles an hour. A black servant, who reposed on the box beside the fat coachman, uncurled his bandy legs as soon as the equipage drew up opposite Miss Pinkerton's shining brass plate, and as he pulled the bell, at least a score of young heads were seen pouring out of the narrow windows of the stately old brick house. Nay, the acute observer might have recognized the little red nose of good-natured Miss Jemima Pinkerton herself rising over some geranium pots in the window of that lady's own drawing-room. "It is Mrs. Sedley's coach, sister," said Miss Jemima. "Sambo, the black servant, has just rung the bell, and the coachman has a new red waistcoat." "Have you completed all the necessary preparations incident to Miss Sedley's departure, Miss Jemima?" asked Miss Pinkerton herself, that majestic lady, the Semiramis of Hammersmith, the friend of Dr. Johnson, the correspondent of Mrs. Chapone herself. "The girls were up at 4 this morning packing her trunks, sister," replied Miss Jemima. "We have made her a beau-pot." "Say a bouquet, Sister Jemima, 'tis more genteel." "Well, a bouquet almost as big as a haystack. I have put up 2 bottles of the gillyflower water for Mrs. Sedley, and the receipt for making it in Amelia's box." "And I trust, Miss Jemima, you have made a copy of Miss Sedley's account. This is it? Very good. £93 4s. Be kind enough to address it to John Sedley, Esquire, and to seal this billet which I have written to his lady." In Miss Jemima's eyes, an autograph letter of her sister, Miss Pinkerton, was an object of as deep veneration as would have been a letter from a sovereign. Only when her pupils quitted the establishment, or when they were about to be married, and once, when poor Miss Birch died of the scarlet fever, was Miss Pinkerton known to write personally to the parents of her pupils, and it was Jemima's opinion that if anything could console Mrs. Birch for her daughter's loss, it would be that pious and eloquent composition in which Miss Pinkerton announced the event. In the present instance, Miss Pinkerton's billet was to the following effect: "The Mall, Chiswick, June 15, 18 . Madam, after her 6 years' residence at the Mall, I have the honour and happiness of presenting Miss Amelia Sedley to her parents as a young lady not unworthy to occupy a fitting position in their polished and refined circle. Those virtues which characterize the young English gentlewoman, those accomplishments which become her birth and station, will not be found wanting in the amiable Miss Sedley, whose industry and obedience have endeared her to her instructors, and whose delightful sweetness of temper has charmed her aged and her youthful companions. In music, in dancing, in orthography, in every variety of embroidery and needlework, she will be found to have realized her friends' fondest wishes. In geography there is still much to be desired, and a careful and undeviating use of the backboard for 4 hours daily during the next 3 years is recommended as necessary to the acquirement of that dignified deportment and carriage so requisite for every young lady of fashion. In the principles of religion and morality, Miss Sedley will be found worthy of an establishment which has been honoured by the presence of the great lexicographer and the patronage of the admirable Mrs. Chapone. In leaving the Mall, Miss Amelia carries with her the hearts of her companions and the affectionate regards of her mistress, who has the honour to subscribe herself, Madam, your most obliged, humble servant, Barbara Pinkerton. P.S. Miss Sharp accompanies Miss Sedley. It is particularly requested that Miss Sharp's stay in Russell Square may not exceed 10 days. The family of distinction with whom she is engaged desire to avail themselves of her services as soon as possible. This letter completed, Miss Pinkerton proceeded to write her own name and Miss Sedley's in the fly-leaf of a Johnson's Dictionary, the interesting work which she invariably presented to her scholars on their departure from the Mall. On the cover was inserted a copy of Lines addressed to a young lady on quitting Miss Pinkerton's school at the Mall by the late revered Dr. Samuel Johnson. In fact, The lexicographer's name.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?